Household level insight is the key input for media planning these days. Not just because the data is better, more granular, at scale, but because in order to plan across a fragmented ecosystem, you need to have as granular of a data set as possible and as complete of a data set as possible to have the breadth of insight and the depth of knowledge that allows you to do this across every platform with confidence. That's harder to achieve than you may think because the overlap between data sets is one of those fragmentation problems today. It's not just the fragmentation of screens and viewing, it's this fragmentation of the data behind it. But if you can get those assets to be joined together in the right way, I think your planning capabilities will be that much more powerful.
And Ampersand sits at the crossroads of data and distribution. So how are you unifying this very fragmented TV supply space?
The most important data asset today in the marketing world, in my opinion, is identity. Accurate identity, validated identity, privacy compliant identity, and scaled identity. And the good news for us at Ampersand, working in partnership with our MVPD owners and affiliates, is our identity spine is exactly that. It is a privacy compliant, anonymous ID that can be associated with postal address, which is stable and at scale, as well as IP address, which can be an unreliable signal, but not for us because we're the source of that IP address. That's a really powerful combination that lets us generate insight back and forth from a household to a device level and back again, and do so with confidence that that linkage is accurate, privacy compliant, and providing value to marketers for how their media actually performed.
And what does this mean for the healthcare space?
So the healthcare space is a very unique one because the data is as sensitive as it gets. There are that much more privacy regulations to make sure that we are ensuring are always complied with. And there are frequently differences in regulation at the state level. I don't see a national regulation coming anytime soon for that category. So that even increases that fragmentation even more because the way one state deals with these policies might be different than another. It makes it that much more important that you have the scale and the workflows in place to navigate those challenges. Now, the good news is, given that you're dealing frequently in the healthcare space with very niche audiences, depending on the type of condition that you're looking at, when you have a scaled data asset to begin with, you can get very granular in how you can deal with niche audiences, niche behaviors, as well as other attributes that you want to layer into the insights portfolio that you're looking for.
And everyone's talking about viewer first buying. What actually has to change across the ecosystem to make that work?
I can think of two things. The first is we need to get a little bit faster. And we are getting faster, but we're getting faster while the world behind us gets more fragmented. So every time that we solve a challenge to re-aggregate what has been fragmented, there's a new data source or a new media tactic that we want to incorporate into that complete view. So to get faster, that allows you to generate insight more quickly, be smarter in how you're using your investment dollars. The second one I would say is to really make sure that you're using high quality data. One thing that I fear, especially with all the excitement around AI, is that the quality of the training data that goes into a lot of the AI models that are being used more and more often in the marketing ecosystem, that training data is not up to snuff. And what that will risk is the AI models that you have built and that might become commoditized are going to generate insight that doesn't have a lot of signal to it, that isn't very meaningful. And that risks a doom loop where then it'll train on that degraded data further and on and on and on and on. So if you don't have really high quality and accurate first party data as a training element for these models, I think you're risking actually missing what's happening with your customer base and with your campaign, your actual campaign performance, because you're so excited about how AI can help. So that fundamental input, I still think, is the most critical starting point.
Okay, and speaking of AI, it's showing up in TV everywhere. Where will predictive content intelligence make the biggest difference?
Yeah, the predictive insight, I think, is one of the major upsides of something like an AI first marketing world. And you're seeing evidence and excitement with marketers doing that. We are focused on making sure that the viewing insight, the identity, the ad exposure that goes into that program is accurate and at the highest scale possible. And we think that that will increasingly be a differentiator as AI becomes the norm across everything that we do.